So I have a question for you. What is your favorite parade memory? You've got a parade memory.
It's when I was like in Minnesota in 1957, 1958. There's a Halloween parade. And my mom dressed me up like an old man. I hated it. In fact, I had a mask on. And through that, mostly through the hurricane, I was kind of teared up a little bit. But it was fun. We got a lot of laughs and people liked it.
So it was a memorable parade experience for you. Okay, that's good. That's actually quite good. Who else has got a parade memory? Daisy.
Rose Parade when I was in the Fuller Seminary.
The Rose Parade when you were at Fuller Seminary?
Yeah.
And you
People
tell...
are unbelievable. The day before the parade, around 3, they start to sit on the street, along the whole street.
Yes. Yes.
So there's no traffic there for a day.
Yeah. Close that. Yeah.
Yeah. Night time they.
Colorado Boulevard. Yeah. Good. Who else has got a parade memory? Yes.
I lived on 4th and Oak in downtown Portland. And they ran this parade right by my building, right on schedule, during the Rose Parade, the festival and whatnot. You couldn't get out the door. You couldn't do a thing. I remember that parade. It was a
You remember that parade because you were housebound.
Yeah. They're like, man, go away. Oh, that and all the protests that would go right through our building. All happy days.
Who else has a parade? Yes.
I live in Anoka, Minnesota, the Halloween capital of the world, and they have parades every year. And they come right down the street from my house, and I like watching the bands and stuff. It's really, really nice. And I hear
Are the bands kind of local, all high school and junior high?
And they usually practice like 2 weeks before, and so I hear them for 2 weeks practicing. And then when the parade comes by, they're so much better.
Who else has a parade memory?
In high school, I was in the marching band, and one day we were doing a parade. It was the parade on Friday, or Saturday morning or something. And when we were marching down the street, there was a news camera right there in the middle. And, you know, we're marching, and oh, never going to be on the local news. And I pushed my glasses up like that. And they caught that, and they played that all weekend long. A commercial for the news.
Vanity, vanity, always vanity. And that one's pretty hard to beat. Does anybody else want to attempt? Parade memory? I like community parades. The kind that go down your street, you know, where all the kids and everybody in the community is doing something, and they're all out there, and you know, the brownies and the campfire girls have got their thing, and the 4-H has got their thing, and they're in the back of some guy's pickup truck, or on a trailer that's pulled by the pickup truck, or if they know somebody who has a semi-truck, you know, and then they're pulling. I mean, that's really a big float then. So I really enjoy community parades. And then I would say that the most wonderful parade experience for me was the Rose Parade. We lived in Pasadena as well when we were at Fuller Seminary. And the thing about the Rose Parade is that it's not only spectacularly beautiful in terms of the colors, but what you don't see on television, what you can't understand by watching it on television, is the fragrance. Whenever a float comes by, and all the floats are made out of flowers, and so you just get this grand, wonderful smell of flowers that are coming at you constantly throughout the entirety of the parade. And then the parade that I would consider to be the most impressive and the parade with the most soul is the Guam Liberation Day Parade. When we lived on Guam, they celebrated every July they have a big parade down Marine Corps Drive, which celebrates the liberation. Yes?
It's not July 4, it's July 19 is the...
I said every July. Yes, yes.
July 19 is the
July
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day, exactly. Yeah, and that's a wonderful parade because people still remember. There are still enough people around who remember when the Marines liberated Guam from the Japanese occupation. And so it's a very, they're very grateful. It comes out of kind of this heart. They still, you know, if not the adults, the children of the adults. So it's a big parade, and it's got a lot of military in it. You know, Guam's a big military place, and so they've got a lot of military in it, and it's got all the, you know, the soldiers and sailors are all marching with all their equipment and such, and it's just a fun parade to be a part of, to sit through, and usually it rains on you when you're there, and it's, I mean, you hope it rains on you, otherwise you're overheating anyway. So it's just. I suspect, though, that for those at Jesus' triumphal entry parade, that must have been the most energetic and probably the parade, if not the life high point for many of those people. Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on a borrowed donkey colt. It was a symbolically rich moment as Jesus entered the city in the manner of this kind of conquering king. Except instead of this huge steed, Jesus comes on this humble donkey. Not just a humble donkey, but a donkey colt. Which is very reminiscent of the words of the ancient prophet Zechariah. Words which these people have been stewing on. That they've been churning and turning over and over and analyzing for 500 agonizing years. Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Sing aloud, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king will come to you. He is righteous and victorious. He is humble and riding on an ass, on a colt, the offspring of a donkey. And now, in their lifetime, in their moment, it was all unfolding before their eyes. Up to that point, there had been no end of speculation about the identity of Jesus. Whether many, if not most, were laying odds that he was the predicted Messiah. And then with all of this equestrian motorcade into the city, it was to the people totally obvious who Jesus was and where he was going with this thing. He was the Messiah. He was the Messiah King riding into the capital city to take charge, to dismiss the Roman oppressors, and to pull the kingdom back together after 900 years of disarray. So you can hardly blame the crowd for turning Jesus' entrance into a Liberation Day parade. Suddenly, the people broke from the sides and engulfed the donkey colt and his rider. And they started singing ancient songs of royal ascent. You know, they chanted, "Long live the King," or the Hebrew equivalent, which was Hosanna. Yeah. And as Jesus moved forward, they pulled off their coats and they threw them onto the ground in front of him in order to make a red carpet, so to speak. And then in the other Gospels, it reports that they cut palm branches as well and added those to this carpet that they were laying out in the streets, hence we call it Palm Sunday. It was this kind of spontaneously choreographed flash mob that made the Chinese Olympics feel like it was child's play. With dancing and singing and celebration and praise. And, well, it was wonderful. Unless you were one of the Jewish religious leaders. All this enthusiasm disturbed the sensibilities of the Jewish religious leaders. I mean, part of it was a concern about keeping the peace, right? I mean, you don't want to draw too much attention, the attention of the Roman soldiers that are on duty at that particular time. The soldiers all had big swords, and if they felt threatened by a loud, sweaty mob, they could have easily come down and cut down and killed thousands of people in no time at all. And thought absolutely nothing about it. Jesus' parade was, as they saw it, a threat to public safety. And of course, the religious leaders themselves, they were not really so impressed with Jesus to begin with. They had training, they had knowledge, they had position, and no upstart Messiah was going to unseat them. The Romans were evil, but at least they tolerated the Jewish religious establishment. And Jesus' crowd could easily disestablish them. It really wouldn't take a whole lot. Their hold on the limited power that the Romans allowed them was actually pretty weak. And then in addition to all that, the way that the crowd was talking, chanting, singing, yelling, shouting, it sounded as though they were attributing divinity to Jesus. And the Pharisees, they certainly did not believe that Jesus was from God. And so they assumed then that God might lash out at everyone as retribution for his blasphemy, or their blasphemy of attributing divinity to him. They were concerned about judgment. So Jesus' parade was this lose, lose, lose kind of situation as far as the Pharisees were concerned. So, according to Luke 19:39, some of the Pharisees who had infiltrated the crowd were worked their way up to Jesus, and they issued to him a cease and desist order. Teacher, scold your disciples. Tell them to stop. And without a nanosecond of hesitation, Jesus blew them off. Verse 40, he answered, I tell you, if they were silent, the stones and the hound dogs would shout. If somehow, if some way, the crowd could be silenced, the rest of creation would pick it right up, even down to the most inanimate rocks, stones, pebbles. I mean, yes, this was an insult. Think about it. You Duphi Pharisees are dumber than the rocks, for even they would join in the parade and the praise. And of course, the Pharisees would have been familiar with the passage from Habakkuk 2, I think it's 9 through about 11. It's on the right-hand side of the page. where the prophet verbally levels the rich and the powerful. It says, "Doomed to the one making evil gain for his own house, for putting his own nest up high, for delivering himself from the grasp of calamity. You plan shame for your own house, cutting off many peoples and sinning against your own life. A stone will cry out from a village wall, and a tree branch will respond." The stones have far more sense of justice and fairness and righteousness. And they will cry out against you. That's what stones do, according to the prophet. They've been around for a gazillion years, and so they have the perspective to judge, to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. And it's sounding like Jesus here, by using this analogy, is telling the Pharisees that they would be under judgment. The stones would cry out against them. The stones would cry out praise, but they would cry out against them. But it's even more than that. When Jesus says, "I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout," it's also a major theological statement. For Jesus is indirectly identifying himself as the Creator. The one who would be recognized for who he is by the very creation itself. In other words, he's saying, you Pharisees need to take a chill pill. That's a technical theological term. Works for me. The Easter parade and praise are unstoppable. The Easter parade and praise are unstoppable. And indeed, that's what the triumphal entry is. It's this grand Easter parade. The beginning of the march to Calvary, and then ultimately after their brief stop there, onto the destination, which is Resurrection Sunday. And the Easter parade and praise are unstoppable. That's the point that Luke, the gospel writer, is trying to convey to his readers, and it's my key point this morning, if you're filling those things out on the message guide, the Easter parade and praise are unstoppable. In spite of, this is number one, in spite of opposition. Even with the opposition, it's unstoppable. If I had lost it and run out into the middle of the Guam Liberation Day parade and held my hands up to the oncoming soldiers, kind of this Tiananmen Square thing, you know, and even if I was standing there blowing a whistle as loud as I could, even if I had a bullhorn of some sort, the parade would keep on coming and pushing right past me. Now, people on both sides of the street would be appalled at my ridiculous behavior. But the Marines and the airmen and the coasties and the sailors and the soldiers, they're so focused forward that they would not give it a second thought, and they would just keep on moving. When they're under orders, the parade is unstoppable. Likewise, it's unstoppable in spite of misunderstandings. It's unstoppable in spite of misunderstandings. That's number two. You see the crowd and all of those cheering for Jesus along the parade route. The crowd was a most fickle lot. In spite of the signs and the wonders, the miracles, in spite of the Kingdom of God lectures delivered directly by Jesus himself and the accompanying parables, in spite of the way that he treated people, especially the poor and the marginalized, the people that were off on who didn't have much, in spite of it all, the crowd remained basically clueless as to what Jesus was up to. The crowd then is a case study in the human condition. They totally misunderstood the nature of his kingdom. They were looking for a Jewish-friendly version of the Romans to replace the Romans. When you understand power in terms of force and coercion, you tend to project that understanding on God. Yes, you might baptize it a little bit, clean it up, but in contrast, Jesus' kingdom agenda and his approach to saving the world totally stands the concepts of power and influence on their heads. Jesus came as a servant, not as a conqueror. He came on a donkey colt, not on a big horse. He came to lay down his life in such a way that it would ultimately break the bonds of sin and grant forgiveness to all who would accept it. But the self-focused crowd did not understand this. And it seems that within hours after they were out on the streets acclaiming him this great king, they started a recall drive, and they were standing in front of the Roman prefect Pontius Pilate, and the crowd was shouting, "Crucify him!" Right. The crowd is very fickle in the Gospels, and in their misunderstanding of Jesus, the crowd is bipolar, swinging from pole to pole. Do you understand Jesus and what he is truly up to? Can you get behind him? Can you stay behind him regardless of where that appears to lead? The Easter parade and praise are unstoppable in spite of, and this is the third thing, in spite of breakdowns. One of the most embarrassing moments in the Rose Parade is when a float which is intricately covered with $300,000 worth of flowers, has a mechanical failure and has to be towed. Or what about all those Cub Scouts on the community float that they've worked so hard on, and then the pickup truck that's pulling the trailer breaks down 300 feet from the starting line of the parade. They don't even get into the parade before the pickup truck gives up the ghost. We talk about disappointment. Breakdowns are a part of any parade. And a good parade has this backup plan so that breakdowns can be pulled by tractors or tow trucks. And while the breakdowns are disappointing at that point, they are not terminal to the parade itself. The parade continues to move on. They don't block everything else. I mean, it moves forward. Jesus' disciples, whom, as you remember, were the ones who secured the donkey on his behalf. They were the ones who marched in front of Jesus in the parade. And by the way, you always want to march in front of the animals. They, at a critical stop along the parade route, desert Jesus. Even Peter, kind of the chief muckety-muck of the disciples. Even Peter 3 times denied knowing Jesus. That is a breakdown. But the breakdowns did not stop the parade, and eventually the disciples recovered, and they went on to lead other Jesus parades after his ascension. And again, the point is, the Easter parade and parades are unstoppable, even with the opposition, even with the misunderstandings, even with the breakdowns. So you might be thinking, that you are not good enough to ride in the parade. You're not faithful enough. I'm not going to name names. Or you're not consistent enough. You're not reliable enough to make it a meaningful experience for yourself and everybody else. So you usually sit out in the parades. Or, you may find a spot along on the sidewalk to watch. Well, look at the misfits in Jesus' Easter parade. Jesus himself is the only stable character in the parade. And he's en route to die on a cross. For those who oppose him, for those who misunderstand him, and those who break down, for the misfits. But Jesus is offering a place in his parade even for the misfits. As a matter of fact, if you look around at everyone in the Unstoppable Parade, they are all unqualified misfits. Nobody deserves to be in the parade. And the miracle is that things in the parade are moving forward at all. Now this might actually stress a few people out. We all want to appear like we are part of something successful. Something attractive, maybe even slick, to the rest of the world. And of course, slick, attractive, and successful do not really describe the grand marshal of the Jesus parade when you think about it. So you have to decide if you're going to continue on in this parade, and I'd hate to see you drop out of the parade, but rest assured that even if you go silent, I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout. And that's because the Easter praise and parade are unstoppable. Let that sink in. Maybe you want to memorize and meditate on Luke 19:40 this week as preparation for our recollection and memorializing of the Calvary events, and also for the celebration of Easter. I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout. The parade does not depend on you. It does not depend on me. It does not depend on anyone else. But perhaps that's the kind of a parade that we want and that we need to be a part of. One with guaranteed outcomes that we know is going to make it to the end. And a backup choir made of rock stars.